It is so great to be here. We're glad you are all here to share in this evening. Thanks to Cheryl and Sue Ann. Thanks to all of our staff who are helping set up and serve, and great volunteers. Though Michelle is off to college, she is still not far from North Lake, and we are so glad that she can be back here and help out and singing as often as she does. It's just a great gift. I'm going to say greetings as well. I want to say thanks to Michelle's dad, who's up there, and he was providing support for that and also making sure that our systems are running okay tonight. So thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate that. I am trying to start a new trend, a new fashion. I'm going to call it tie on tee. And so if it really takes off, you'll know where it started, right? I don't give it much of a shot, but you never know. I'm wearing a T-shirt tonight that we bought on the island of Iona. It's very understated, but I actually love it. And then this is my, I will look for one wool tie or nice new tie sometimes when I travel. And so this is my new Scottish tie, and I like it. And by the way, I'm not going to leave it on any longer. It's too scratchy around my neck without a collar. And I have also a hat that you'll see in several of the pictures. I bought this in Oban, Scotland, just before we got on a 1-hour ferry ride. And I was so glad I had this hat, not just for that ride, but also for many of the times when the weather was, how many Scots folks do we have here tonight? All right. Drike, which means gloomy, right? Dismal, rainy. Yeah, we had some of that weather, and I was really glad I had this hat for the Drike days. So we are really grateful for the chance to do some sharing with you. I will say that what you have on the table is an epistle. I'm going to go ahead and put this up here. Our sabbatical adventures. We have there's not homework for you. There's nothing that you have to read. But I will tell you, part of what I was looking at was the desire to share a few things with you, some of which you may hear echoes of from services, messages. Wow, I can still almost see you. There we go. Good. That's great. And so what I'd hoped was to put a few things in writing. I'll just say it's an epistle to North Lake, and it gives me an opportunity to say some things that have more durability than what we do here tonight. And so it goes along with it. We actually thought if I could write some of those things down and share them with you and others who want to read it, it would allow us to be a little freer tonight to just go with some of the edges of our trip that were more playful or more just incredibly joyous. I will say to you that. That's designed to get your attention. Did it get your attention? It got my attention. That, of course, is Westminster Abbey, and we'll say more about that and the experience we had there. But just kind of what we're going to do tonight is a bit of a quick overview. We'd like to go for about 45 minutes. There'll be lots of pictures. And then afterwards, we'll be glad to answer some questions if you have any questions. And I will also say that this dovetails not only with what you're hearing in worship, but also with three classes I'll be doing on the second Wednesday of each month, beginning a week from tomorrow at 2 o'clock. So on the second Wednesday of each month, September, October, November, I'm doing a series that really grows out of this UK trip on sacred space, sanctuary, and pilgrimage. And so for those of you who have more interest in some of the things that relate to the church as a space that inspires and why people are drawn to it and how that has functioned through the centuries, I invite you to that. You'll get a sense of that tonight, but we'll go into much more depth with the opportunity in those classes. So for any of you who are interested, that's still coming up. We often referred to I kind of talked about our time away as a 7-layer cake, looking at the time period. And so soon after Easter, I had a meeting with the session, and we welcomed a new church administrator, and then we were off officially. And phase one was decompress and transition and just kind of take a break and get ready, and a lot of prayer time. And I would also say then, I had a list of things to read, things that I had been reading ahead of time, and then wanted to really kick into gear, and that afforded me some luxurious time for reading, which I relish. And then we headed off to California. You'll see some slides of that time at Tahoe and time with our son. We came back. We had time here, and Bobbi will tell you a little more about some of the things we did while we were here, because it was away and back, and we did this very intentionally. This was my third sabbatical, and so I've had some ideas of how I wanted to approach it, and even the rhythm within the sabbatical. The highest adventure for us was, of course, the United Kingdom trip, England and Scotland, and you'll hear much more about that tonight than the other elements of this. In fact, we came back from there, and I don't know how many of you use your phone like I do. All the photos we took were on our phones. I didn't go with my digital SLR or anything fancier. We just took it off the phone. But when I came home, I go into museums, and I don't want to read every panel. So take a picture of that panel, take a picture of that panel, take a picture of that panel. Because a lot of times you're in a hurry to go, and so I got it. Guess what? You get home, you got to read it. So where it says here, return and review, I was going through lots of photographs and lots of notes and journal entries that I had been making along the way, both in California as well as in England and Scotland. And then we had some time up in North Carolina, and that was beautiful, and it allowed us to rendezvous with our daughter. Bobbi will tell you more about that. And then really it was good to allocate some time, a little more than a week, about a week and a half, for re-entry and trying to be mentally and spiritually prepared to jump back into things full speed ahead. And so that really was the way it was designed, and God blessed us in so many fashions through this, with things we could plan and so many things that we could never have anticipated. We'll give you some examples of that. Let's talk about family.
Sure.
It's my wife, Bobbi, by the way.
Yeah. So Jeff mentioned that while we were on vacation, or the sabbatical, we were able to spend time with not only our four parents, but also each of our children and their families, which was wonderful. And during that time, we celebrated our grandson's number 2 birthday, second birthday. We celebrated Jeff's mom's 90th birthday, which was wonderful. We had a big party at Freedom Point Assisted Living. And we also, you'll see up here, is that picture? Yeah, the picture on the right, that's our oldest granddaughter, Cassidy. She's 7, and she's a dancer. And so we were able to attend her dance recital, which was really fun. So a lot of nice family times. So this is our oldest son, David, and his family. And it's David and Kelly. And then they have the 3 kids, and they live just exactly 1 hour away, which is wonderful. So it's far enough away that we can, not be in their hair, but also close enough we can call and say, hey, can we come over? We'll be there in an hour. So it's David and Kelly, and then Cassidy, as I mentioned, is a little dancer, and Lila, who just turned 5 yesterday, and then Brooks, whose birthday we celebrated, 2-year-old.
By the way, does anybody remember what happened 5 years ago this week?
Next week, yeah.
Well,
week,
kind of this coming week, yeah. Hurricane Irma.
Yeah.
So in our family, we always said that week began with Lila and ended with Irma. Because Lila was born at the start of the week, and Irma arrived at the end of the weekend. So, yeah.
We'd love to have one-on-one time with our grandkids when the opportunity presents itself. So we had Lila visiting us for one of the weekends, and these are a couple pictures of the adventures. This is Lake Sumter. It was the first time we ever did the little boat ride, so that was fun.
Yeah, it's great.
We visit lots of parks. That is not a hat on his head, that's a ball.
That is
a ball that was deflated by their puppy. So, but Brickson put it up on his head. This is a picture of our daughter, Rachel, and her family, her husband, Jeff, and their 2 children, Simeon and Lily. And they live in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. And we were fortunate to be able to spend a whole week with them near the end of our sabbatical in North Carolina. We split time between Hendersonville and Asheville, which was wonderful. All of our kids love to be outside. They're all very adventurous, and one of the first things we usually do with all of them is go hiking. So you'll see a variety of pictures at parks and hikes and that kind of thing. Simeon's favorite animal is a mouse, so he got his face painted like a mouse. And this was an outdoor train display at Hendersonville. And Jeff captured this beautiful moment between my daughter and I. It was just really special. We rented a house up in the mountains and in Asheville, and we were just kind of sitting there holding hands. And
I said, look this way.
yeah.
So, Simeon's 4 and a half.
Yeah.
He'll be 5 in February.
And Lily just turned 1. He loves to read, so he could read for 3 or 4 hours a day. So this was a nice picture of the 2 of us reading. He's really not bored. He's just really into the book. So here we are at the parks. And that's Lily. Yeah.
Am I smitten? Yes, I am.
We'll get to see all of our kids in a couple weeks. Our nephew is getting married in Utah, outside of Park City, and we're all going to be gathered together, which will be fun too. So, because that doesn't happen very often when all the kids get together. This is our California son, Jordan, and his wife, Brooke, and they have 2 daughters. Jordan is holding June, who turns 2 this month. And Whitney is in Brooke's arms. They love to hike, and they climbed Mount Whitney several years ago, and thus the name of their youngest daughter. And at the bottom of Mount Whitney is a lake called June Lake, and so those are the names of their children.
We're glad they didn't climb some other mountains.
Yeah, that's right. We had a lot of fun with June, playing with her and holding the new baby. Whitney was just born in April, beginning of April. And here we are out for a hike. That's their dog, Clark, who's very big. If you look closely, you can see the city of San Francisco in the background. They live just north of the city in Marin County. And then to the right is Sausalito. So they actually started out in the city living there and then moved to Sausalito and then decided to have a family, so moved farther north where the school districts are really good and geared for young children. One of our most favorite places to go when we're visiting Jordan and Brooke, and we often will sneak away for a day or something and drive up to Point Reyes National Seashore. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I remember the first time I was there several years ago, I kept saying to Jeff, I feel like I'm at the end of the earth, and that's what it kind of feels like. It's kind of it's a beautiful, beautiful place to go to, but it's kind of also like eerie, you know. And so we enjoyed climbing all these steps, both up and down, and going out to the lighthouse this time.
It's spectacular. And although I had never been to Scotland till this summer, I always said when I drove there, I felt like I was in Scotland. And there's a little town there in California called Inverness. We've been to both Invernesses this summer. Yeah. So also, the Presbyterian denomination has a beautiful camp and conference center at Zephyr Point, which is, if you know Lake Tahoe at all, it's kind of oval shaped. north to south long, and about at 5 o'clock, if you think of the oval, about 5 o'clock on that oval, it'd be down here for your perspective, is where Zephyr Point is located. We had a fantastic time going there and staying at one of the cabins. The day before we went, they had 10 inches of snow.
And this was the second week of May.
Second week of May.
We were unprepared.
Well, fortunately, our son and daughter-in-law are great outfitters, so they could make sure we were equipped. The other thing I had to call to find out is the pass open. Will we be able to even get there? And there were a couple different debates. And even the next morning when I called, there was still some question until the afternoon that we'd be able to actually get up there without driving up and around to Reno and down around. So this is the cabin we stayed in.
That's the first cabin.
So we got there, and one of their employees who was brand new working at their intake, their welcome center, gave us this cabin, not knowing it had no heat. And we thought, they said, well, there's space heaters there. So we thought, well, okay, let's give it a try.
We're kind of adventurous.
Yeah, like, we've been camping, we've been out in all kinds of conditions. It's like, this is not going to work, Anyway, the next morning, their staff came by very apologetically because somebody who knew the drill said, "Oh, we're so sorry they put you here." I said, "Yeah, we kind of are too." So they gave us a beautiful cabin. They have a lot of great cabins, but this was first class. It was right on the lake. It was like our balcony was here, and we're looking down at the lake. It was that lovely.
And it had a fireplace and heat.
Yeah, we won't show you all the pictures, but we had 4 inches of snow while we were there that first night, and it was just I've been there. I think maybe this is my 4th time to be at Lake Tahoe, and it just was unlike any time I had seen it before. It was spectacular, just glorious, and we had a great hiking. We were out and about. Any of you've been there? You've heard of Emerald Bay? It's one of it's about 7 o'clock on the lake as you look at it, and it's just a beautiful spot. We spent much of that day out hiking about, and just everywhere you look, it's like, oh, I want a picture of this. It's like, you can't. So after we had come back from there, we're just gonna dive right in now and take a trip over to England and Scotland. And so on June 8th, we flew on Air Canada, and we flew through Toronto. Actually, on the way back, we flew through Montreal, through Toronto over to London Heathrow. It was all night. Actually, we left early in the day. So at this point, when we landed and arrived at Paddington Station in London, getting off the express from Heathrow, we'd been up for well over 24 hours. And I was like, okay, she said to me, "You're really going to take a picture?"
I did.
Yes, I am. We've arrived. Right. And so we checked our bags because we couldn't check in yet, but we checked our bags and we took off. And that day we walked well over 12 miles. And yeah, I mean, we're used to walking hikes, so it wasn't a big deal, but we were just, by the day. So this is Kensington Gardens. Any of you who've been there might recognize in the distance, that's Prince Albert Memorial. And then behind that, the large structure behind it is Royal Albert Hall, which is the great musical venue that, musicians from all over the world aspire. It's kind of like our Carnegie Hall, but it's the place where they would want to go to. Beautiful hiking through there. Somebody gave me this week, so I thought, when writing about church history, we have to go back to the very beginning. And so she thinks, and then she writes, our pastor was born in 1930. I guarantee that, well, first of all, I wasn't born then, but also the church history that we're looking at was incredibly dynamic and over many years' time. I want to just ask, how many of you have been to England and or Scotland? I'm sure there are many of us. Look at all the hands going. Yeah. So many of you have been to the sites and probably even more than what we saw. And so we knew that would be the case. Some of you may not have been there, but we knew some of this would be familiar to you. So we're going to move fairly quickly, but highlighting some of the things that were for us very unique. Of course, Westminster Abbey, this has begun. It's almost 1,000 years old. Almost 1,000 years old. There are parts of it that you can go into, the Pyx chamber, and there's a door, there's the cloisters, which go back into the late 1000s, right? This is the Henry VII Lady Chapel. This is not so old, it's only about 500 years old. Only about 500. Beautiful, elaborate. This is at the cloisters, so it was very touching for me to be there and to walk through. They've got the oldest door in Scotland. They figured the wood was cut down in 1036, just down the hallway to the right as you're looking at that. I'm going to go back for just a second and say, the walk through Westminster Abbey, we probably spent about 4 or 5 hours there, maybe 5 hours.
And I had been to London 7 years ago. My sister and I took a trip, and at the time, one of her best friends' husbands was working there, so we had free lodging, which was so nice. They lived right downtown in London. So I was so anxious to take Jeff back there. I knew we would have fun together to experience that.
Yeah. Amazing. So some of you may realize that, that when you go through Westminster, it is loaded with well over 3,000 marked graves or tombs or crypts where different notables of their culture have been buried. One fellow that I read talked about it as, it's like the Valhalla of the English, and it is a hall that celebrates many, many, many different people and personalities, frankly. It felt like a museum when I was there until we stayed we timed it so our tour and then the time we spent there exploring would finish at the time of the evensong service. So we were there for the evensong service. And they told us typically to expect maybe 100, 150 people. It was a very special service that was conducted to celebrate Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who died just a few years ago in South Africa. The preacher was his daughter. And
his granddaughter was there.
And other family members were there. And the Archbishop of Canterbury was there. He didn't shake hands with me. He didn't recognize me, I guess. But it was, we had, and you know what? 1,500 people came in, filled up. And we got to sit, we were actually in the third row. The first couple rows were all dignitaries. They had lady and baron and all kinds of things.
They came in their hats and their gloves and, dressed to the nines. And we were in our travel clothes.
At this point, we've been awake about 38 hours.
I leaned over to Jeff and I said, I feel so underdressed. And he said, you probably never have dressed like this for church. I said, no. But it was okay.
It was, and it had no trouble staying awake. It was a beautiful service. Everything about it was a glorious service. And that's when it really clicked for me that, this is just not a museum, but it really is a place of worship, and it was palpable, and a beautiful experience. I will say that I'm going to run from that to the Tower of London. Bobbi also had been there, and so she knew it. I didn't know it. Maybe you all knew it. I thought tower means one building. It doesn't mean one building. It's a whole complex. For me, it's a little bit like, I went to college at William & Mary, and Williamsburg is sort of a whole, historic area. Well, that's really what the Tower of London is. It is an historic area, obviously enclosed. It's walled in. But, I thought we'd spend a few hours there. We spent, I don't know,
about 6.
Yeah. and still, I mean, we did a lot. That's why I said, I'm going to take pictures, It was a great way to, see so many things and learn more about it. Of course, the Tower Bridge, and we were there right after the Platinum Jubilee for the Queen. And so everywhere we went, there were still stanchions up, and there were things that were indicative, and
lots of
posters, flowers. And it looked glorious because everything was dressed up for the Queen's Jubilee. I was thinking about that. She was, her coronation was 1952, and I was born 3 years later. So I've never seen a coronation of, the English crown. We've seen the coronation share where it's done. All the coronations since William the Conqueror are done at Westminster Abbey. So the next time it happens, I will know. Henry III, this is part of the Wakefield Tower. This is and one of the reasons I threw these in here is because I was struck repeatedly by the number of kings all the way through their history. This is 13th century. But the number of kings, queens, whose faith was of central importance to them. And so obviously Roman Catholic faith, but traveled with their own private little altar. So because they didn't actually spend many days in their palaces. They would be out and moving around their kingdom. So they would travel, with a priest, and they would travel with the implements of worship, including their own private shrine. And then, of course, they had private prayer rooms off many of the bedchambers. Many of them had their own prayer rooms. So that said something to me. I was struck by that. The White Tower is the oldest. That is really what it's named for, the Tower of London. It's the White Tower. That was commissioned by William the Conqueror. So again, we're talking about 9.5 centuries ago. And eventually it was turned into an armory, and they use it as a museum for the various arms all the way through British history. I'm standing there in the chapel of St. John, and that chapel has been in continuous use since about 1085. And you can see that heavy Norman construction there, the arches and the heavy pillars, and it's very kind of basic compared to what you see later Gothic. But it was really, to think that William the Conqueror had been in there on a regular basis worshiping, it was like, wow. Wow, yeah. So then we hoofed it over to St. Paul's, and St. Paul's Cathedral. Some of you probably know London had a horrific fire in 1666. Took down just about everything in the city, particularly in one area, including what had been the site of the cathedral. So then there was a need to erect a new cathedral. And the new cathedral was put up then in the late 1600s. It's in a Baroque style, different than other Gothic ones that we saw. It is very fancy. And that particular dome is one of the landmarks of London, known to people all around the world. It dominated the landscape for many years. And that's the interior of the dome. And many have said that it is, of course, the predecessor and an inspiration for our own U.S. Capitol. And it is precisely 365 feet high, intentionally, one for every day of the year. So I love, being inside and looking up the interior of that dome. And the artwork all the way around is stunning, just absolutely stunning what they have done. In the middle, underneath the dome, this is directly under the dome, there's a Latin inscription. It says, "Underneath lies buried Christopher Wren, the builder of this church and city, who lived beyond the age of 90 years, not for himself, but for public good. Reader, if you seek his monument, look about you." Look around you, because the monument, you were in the middle of the monument. And just before, we stayed there for the evensong service as well. And just before that service commenced, I ran to one of the docents and said, "May I go down to the crypt? I'd like to find Christopher Wren's grave." And she said, "I'm not sure you have time." I said, I know where it is. I'm going to go directly there. I'll come right back up, I promise." She believed me. She let me go.
After you said you went to William and Mary.
I did.
Yes.
I said, "I'm a graduate of the College of William and Mary."
She said, "Go."
And I said, "I've had classes at the Christopher Wren building." He designed what is the oldest academic building in the United States. And so I've always known about Christopher Wren since the early 1970s. And I was like, I need to see this guy's burial crypt. While I'm here, I got to see it. And so going down there, again, it was a wonderful point of connection. Loved it. And you can see the difference in style. It's glamorous. It's beautiful. The artwork is just at every direction you look. As we got outside, and it was a glorious blue sky, and it had been such a full day. That was our day. That was the Tower of London and St. Paul's Cathedral. And that was following the evensong service. We got to sit in it's Q-U-I-R-E, choir, which means we got to sit up where the monks used to sit, if you will. And the setting is beautiful. And watching the St. Paul's Cathedral Choir leading that service, including the boys, because they have the boys' choir, the trebles who sing, the higher parts. And so it's just amazing. Some familiar sights around London, just a few. We actually did a great tour inside of the Imperial War Museum and Churchill's War Room, underground. Have any of you been there? Okay, so again, some of you have been there. We actually enjoyed that so much more than we thought. We were there about 4 hours, and the Churchill Museum, and seeing where they kept him safe. I mean, right in that room, the king, the queen came to visit him right in that chamber, and of course he was a lot of times in the map room and other rooms they had for their meetings with staff. But pretty amazing setting, and yeah, we had fun. We walked around a lot, got to see a lot of the different kind of typical touristy things, and so we're not going to show as much of that. That's just to wake you up in case you've been sleeping. St. Paul's is on the right as you're looking. Canterbury is on the left. I really got some great new ideas for the North Lake pulpit. Yeah, can't you see that? Yeah. So off we went to Canterbury. Canterbury is one of the places that I have mentioned in worship, and so I won't belabor it today, but we had a great day in the town of Canterbury as well as at the cathedral itself. You're looking at windows that are probably,
old.
Yeah, 900 years old. Those are some of the oldest, medieval windows. And by the way, stained glass was really hard to protect and preserve. So it's one of the things that often would be lost, either because of bombing, because of just normal, loss of the leading in the windows and so forth.
A lot of the cathedrals we went to, they would have a mix of brand new contemporary stained glass and then the very, very old, centuries old. So it was really interesting to walk around and see that diversity.
Murder in the Cathedral. I've read T.S. Eliot's play. I certainly have read the history about this. I've known about it many, many years. It took place right in that spot on the left. That marks the location of the murder of the Archbishop Thomas Becket. Thomas Becket, murdered presumably under the wishes of King Henry II, who claims that it was a mistake, it was a misunderstanding, that they were not acting on his authority, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, it was a turning point, and so it also added to the significance of Canterbury as a destination for pilgrimage. And Becket very soon became a saint, and also Henry II lamented what he had done. He ended up coming some time later and crawled on his knees all the way through the crowd and through the sanctuary to ask forgiveness, to be restored. So it's very, very poignant stories that go along with that. I've included this too because this is a small and relatively new addition out to the cloister. Cloister is the walk around, and these are abbeys. Remember, these are or places where monks would have lived and worked and worshipped and taught and so forth. And so the cloister is a very significant part of that. And in the tracery of the window up above, there are these recent additions, and I won't go all the details, but this is done and put in by Kent County, which Canterbury is in the county of Kent, which is southeastern county, southeasternmost point of England. And I love the motto, "Be brave, for there is much to dare." And so that caught my eye. And actually, I didn't know what it was at first, and then I walked up and this is one of the pictures that I took, and I've studied and reflected on it. But it's fun for me because I know, including our 2-year-old grandson, we can directly name and map out 17 Hosmer men generations, and it goes all the way back. I mean, like my 12th generation grandfather was James, who was born in 1605, James Hosmer, and he came from Kent, came from a very small village in Kent. And we can go all the way back to 1518 with names and baptism records. So it's a high probability that there was somebody in my family 500 years ago or less who made pilgrimage to Canterbury. And it was, and to see that was really, actually very moving for me. It still is as I think about it. And knowing connections. James came over in 1635. To the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and then he actually ended up settling in Concord, Massachusetts, and so we know that line. And I've dabbled with it. We've got others in the family who know much more about the genealogy. But one of the things I found out, and not till recently, was that this was installed on Kent Day. There's a day to celebrate County Kent. And Kent Day coincides with the saint day for St. Augustine, who actually helped to bring Christianity to that part of the world. Different saint. This is St. Augustine, not from North Africa, but one who was sent by the Pope to help start Christianity there. Long story short, too late, you know. That saint day is May 26th, which is my birthday. And it was just another, like, wow. It was, you know, I know God's up to things all the time, but it was very moving for me to be in those cloisters and to think, I've got relatives maybe 500 years ago who had been around here. Then we went out to Lindisfarne.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to do this?
Be great. Yeah, Lindisfarne, I mentioned a little bit a couple of weeks ago in worship, and it is one of the islands off the coast of England, and it is tidal, so, you know, I think I mentioned that's the idiot box halfway out there. Because if you get caught out there in the midst of the tide, you need refuge. And many people, about once a month, lose a car out there because they haven't paid attention to the tidal schedule. And so the locals call that the idiot box. And fortunately, we didn't get stuck there. We were onto the island and off, and it's a beautiful place to go visit. This is a castle, but it's also known for the priory that was there, the abbey, which was started in 635. 635. Goes all the way back. And there are other iterations of the faith that were there that we got to look over. And it's an amazing place.
Do you want to tell?
Yeah. Craig Bennett had given me, is Craig here tonight by any chance? Craig had given me a small book that is on Celtic Christianity, and there's a lovely prayer in here about Lindisfarne. In fact, I really love what he shared with me. Bobbi, will read that?
Yeah. On Lindisfarne, walking in the ancient footsteps of St. Cuthbert, I know I am standing on holy ground. Sacred steps that prayed, surrendered, sacrificed, saved, and their memory lingers on. An inspirational presence saturating the landscape with the holiness of the one true God. Yeah, beautiful.
When I was a freshman in college, I had a class with a Professor Tom Finn, who had been a Roman Catholic priest, left the priesthood to become a professor, and I think also to get married. But he was an outstanding teacher, and I remember his eloquent description of the Lindisfarne Gospels, which are the illustrated manuscripts that were being done. And any of you may have read how the Irish saved civilization pertains to this, because they were the ones, as Rome was falling, who were the keepers of the classical history and the scriptures and very beautiful scripts that they used for the Bible. The book of Kells was done at Iona, which we'll see in a moment. Lindisfarne was actually prepared here. And because of Viking invasions, it was later moved off of the coastline. But this just being there was like, again, something I first heard about. As part of it, I went from textbooks to like actually being in places that had meant something to me. One of those is Durham.
Yeah, Durham. I wanted to go to Durham specifically. Well, Jeff wanted to go also, but I had a specific request because my oldest sister, Autumn, studied at the University of Durham when she was at Penn State. And So it held a special place in my heart, and she was at the College of Bede. So we found out exactly where she slept and went to school, so that was fun. One of the things I really appreciate for any of you who have ever done any needlework, like counted cross stitch or embroidery or knitting, I took a lot of pictures of the handiwork. I will just say that it was presented to us as groups of women that had done it. There maybe were some men there too, but I was just marveling at the handiwork and the beauty of these, what do you call them? I don't know, works of art. I mean, some of them were altarpieces, some of them were kneeling pads, and they were just so detailed and intricate. It was just fascinating to me. I really appreciated it.
Durham, again, was one of the monasteries, and so the middle picture there is where the monks, it was like their dormitory. Now it's converted into a library and ultimately to a museum. But if you go back far enough, it was a monastic community, a very intentional Christian community, like an abbey. And so we were over to the coastline to Whitby and visited another of the famous ruins, and then down to Scarborough. And Scarborough is just a few miles away from Whitby. And we stayed on the North Bay.
We didn't go to the fair.
We did not go to the fair. I've had a lot of people say, have you been to Scarborough Fair? I've been to Scarborough, I didn't make it to the fair. But it's quite beautiful. We were up on the Scarborough hillside at the castle. Those foundational stones are at least 900 years old in place. The stones are older, of course, but in place for over 900 years. And the castle's at the top to the right, the ruins, and we're looking out over the North Sea. It's just a gorgeous place to watch a sunset, and really blessed to be there. And then we went on to York the next day. In York, particularly wanted to see the cathedral, which is there. It's spectacular. It's another one of the, cathedral means seat of the bishop. Cathedra is the seat of the bishop in Latin. So it's where the bishop's church is. And this is the ceiling in what's called a chapter house. And a chapter house is where they read one chapter a day of St. Benedict's rule about how they live together. So the St. Benedict's rule would give them, here's how they will form their community as a Christian community, intentional Christian community. And so they would read one chapter a day. And that's where they held all their meetings and made all their decisions in the chapter house. And if you go around to different abbeys and cathedrals, you always want to check out the chapter house because they've done some very impressive things with those. Obviously, York would pay tribute, like many churches did, to the royals. So if you were a king or queen, you probably got sculpted to be in their sanctuary. This is some more of the beautiful needlework. And one of the hangings that they have there, we think that's Adam and Eve, right? On the right. And those windows are close to 1,000 years old. Those are some of the oldest stained glass windows. They're not very robust in color. They are very intricate, and they call those the Five Sisters, and they are very impressive. The whole setting, this is looking both directions inside of the York Cathedral, and it's beautiful. So while we were there, again, God just does all kinds of things. And so while we were there, a wedding broke out. And so we get to watch the bride and her father and attendants coming in through that south door, and the priest and the dirge, the one who accompanies the priest in, Verge, carries him in. And this is what we got to hear.
was
have
7
another
voices.
format.
That was 7 voices.
7 voices. Gives you
Yeah.
some feel for the acoustics in that space, because there's no amplification. That is simply their voices carrying.
And we had the privilege while we were taking the tour of hearing them warm up, which I could have listened to them all day. So prior to us going, Jeff and I were recommended to read Ken Follett's book, Pillars of the Earth. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it.
It's only 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
So.
And so it was just so appropriate to read it prior to seeing all these cathedrals and just marveling at, you know, these artisans and stonemasons who spent their entire lives, you know, building these cathedrals, and a lot of them would never even see them come to completion because they would take a couple hundred years to build. But I loved the book, but as we were leaving York, right, York Cathedral, I was fascinated because I saw this. And of course, wherever you go, there's scaffolding. You know, they're always repairing and, you know, renovating cathedrals and things. But this was particularly different because this was like an outdoor workshop where the stonemasons and artisans are physically working out there, carving, you know, and replicating things that they're going to put back into the cathedral. So it was really cool.
Yeah, beautiful to watch them work. Hull is on the Humber River. If you've ever heard of Northumberland or Northumbria, it's named from any of the land that's north of the Humber River. So that's where the derivation of it is. And the Humber River then is kind of a dividing point. Hull is not a real destination, but I really wanted to go there because William Wilberforce was born there, one of the great, you know, advocates for the elimination of the slave trade. And we got there, and his museum was closed. I was allowed to get in to take a picture of his statue. That was it. And that was special permission to get in to do that. But we enjoyed it. It's very historic. It was wonderful to see. They're known for their white telephone booths. But we also got in to see Hullminster. And I showed you some photos of this before. In fact, we stayed in a place right across, you wouldn't call it an alley, but it's a old brick road in the center of town. And this is what the inside of their sanctuary looks like, very colorful. It is beautiful what they've done there. And I also mentioned the fact that this is where they had, right in the middle of their nave, of their worship space, they had things cleared out, and they had a preschool gathering of mothers of you know, Mother's Day Out kind of thing. Saw the priests get down on the floor with them, and it was a beautiful, and of course the baptismal font's right behind that. So on the washed and fed message, you would have seen a couple of those photographs. Then we went to Lancaster. We lived for 4 years in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, right across the river from York, Pennsylvania, and not far from Carlisle. So we got to see all of those again, only the English version. And the castle, which dates back many centuries, was made into a prison, and the tour of the prison. We'll tell you more about that another time. St. Mary's Priory is right behind it, again in Lancaster. And inside, they had this, we didn't know it, they had this amazing exhibit going on called Gaia, and it was about the earth and taking care of the earth. And so they had this colossal globe inside with all the NASA specifications. It rotated, and it was, and there was music to go with it. And then they had exhibits there to trying to encourage people, you know, how to be more thoughtful about this gift of the earth. And so we were not the only ones there that day. It was interesting to see how many people. And the church was actually filled and excited to have people there who had not otherwise maybe been in church. And then off we went to the Lake District, and the Lake District was just pure joy, pure joy. As I'm sure Bobbi, I'm going to flow through some pictures, and Bobbi can comment on them. So,
I loved it. I just kept oohing and awing. It's a mix of mountains and lakes, and it is a kind of a recreation area for people who live in England to go to, because it is the only area with mountains and lakes. So you see a lot of young people, you know, hikers, campers, that kind of thing. But it's just beautiful. The train is tricky at times. Jeff did a great job driving on the wrong side of the road, on the right side. But it's full of history too, because of all the, there's a lot of, reminds me of Pennsylvania, the old stone homes and a lot of sheep and stone walls. And we were up over a pass right here, and we said, let's get out of the car and take some pictures. Well, the wind was ferocious. As you can see, I was very chilly.
Yeah. It was beautiful, and our son lives near Windermere, close to Orlando, and the original Windermere is in the Lake District. Mm-hmm. So we've seen that, and we were at Ullswater Lake, and that was the nice little Vauxhall Grandland X that we were able to tool around in, and it was actually very serviceable. And the scenery is just amazing. And while we were there, we again did some hiking.
In the rain.
In the rain. That's why I was really glad to have that hat.
Yeah.
And how about this for a tree? It's like, whoa, that is huge. Yeah. That looks like one that's out of a movie where the trees talk to you, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't it look like one? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So just a glorious setting. And then Carlisle Cathedral is 900 years old. It started in 1122, and so they're having their 900th anniversary. And while we were there, it was great. Beautiful setting. This is what it's really known for. And I mentioned this in the epistle that I've given you on hope, because this is a church that's been through a lot. Carlisle's been through a lot, and like many of them have. And yet they're still vibrant. They're still there, and the hope of Christ is alive and well. And so that was so beautiful to be able to see. And the church itself is elegant, but knowing that, seeing this community. And so that particular royal blue ceiling is well known around the world. Then we had to, of course, make a stop at Hadrian's Wall. And that's 1,900 years old. That was begun in 122. 122. So 1,900 years ago is when they were building this wall. That's not the wall that Hadrian built, but it's one right close by there. That's just a scene that I love. And Scotland. And St. Giles, which is the church in Edinburgh, where John Knox was the pastor at the end of his career. Very significant, beautiful church. One of many that we were in. We were in 16 different churches, all variety of sizes and shapes, but beautiful setting. The carvings, everything about it is amazing. I got to talk to John for a few minutes, and he was in good form. He's very severe. But Edinburgh is an amazing city. I could have spent 3 weeks in Edinburgh. I could have. There's so much to enjoy. Flodden Walls dates into the 1500s. It's a part of the old city wall. And right next to it on the left, if you're looking, that's George Heriot School, which has been around for about 400 years. It's still a popular private school. And it is the inspiration for Hogwarts School of Magic. Mm-hmm. It is a J.K. Rowling inspiration, and her children actually went to school there. Mm-hmm. They went to school there. So that's, if any of you are Harry Potter fans, Harry Potter stuff is all over Edinburgh, mm-hmm. all over Edinburgh. I'm not really so much, but you couldn't avoid it. It was everywhere. There's the Edinburgh Castle, which you can see why it was such an impregnable. It rises above everything else on a piece of stone, and while the city might fall, the castle would typically be held. And so we enjoyed our walks up and down the Royal Mile. The city is glorious. Look at this photo and then compare it with this painting from 1825. They're actually roughly the same angle, and one or two of the buildings are there from 1825. And they were putting up to the right here, they were building, and now, I should show you this. Any of you who've been there, this is right now where the Waverly train station is, and the trains come in and out of town right through this valley. Trains come in and out of town right there. And right over here is where they're building the Royal Academy for Science, and then eventually, where they put the National Art Gallery. Sir Walter Scott is everywhere and can be seen everywhere in Scotland. And now I want to just say, so here is the National Art Gallery. We've got a few shots inside there. There's the castle up on, this is from another angle. Right here is the assembly hall where all the Presbyterians met. That's the Presbyterian gathering place. Now it's been taken over as New College and the University of Edinburgh. So it's fascinating. Everywhere you go, there's something of quite fascinating interest. The one on the right looks like a covenant brother of mine. And I've sent it out to our group, and everybody agreed. His name is Stan Wood. Stan actually has some Scottish blood, quite a bit. And it was interesting because that is a Presbyterian pastor who served at Canongate Kirk in Edinburgh, who was painted. That's a Presbyterian pastor skating down that area that I showed you that would have been frozen over. This is a Rembrandt self-portrait that's at that gallery. But even more interesting to me were all the religious paintings and religious symbolism, and spent time with those and trying to understand what the author was after. And then seeing some of the Scottish culture emphasized in their artwork, particularly the Highland culture. And the one on the right is very famous. Many of you, if you've been to Scotland, may recognize it, because it is done with that red stag as a symbol of the Highlands. You can see the Highland peaks behind. And so it's considered to be a very regal rendition. Now, speaking of Scotland, we were there, and we were in Loch Lomond. Any of you have heard of Rob Roy McGregor? This was his territory on the other side of the lake there. And we've enjoyed it. Glencoe is like our Smokies. Reminded us a lot of the Smokies, about the same elevation, approximately, a little bit shorter, but beautiful.
I kind of felt like I was going home because I found out prior to going that I'm 51% Scottish.
Yeah. I'm only 10%. By the way, sod houses were common for centuries. Through the Great Glen, they managed to do a canal all the way through, and there's a lot of elevation change. So right here, I think there's 6 or 7 different locks right in rapid succession for a boat to be able to get through. So that's a very famous series of locks on the Caledonian Canal. Saw the Loch Ness, didn't see a monster. But we were right along there, and actually it's beautiful, like much. Battle of Culloden was fought in the mid-18th century. Pardon? Yeah. So Outlander,
I was very excited because I'm an Outlander fan. Some of you might be. And on the battlefield was Clan Fraser marker. So that's what I was pointing to. That's where they're buried, right there.
I have a lot of competition from Jamie Fraser, who stars in that show. So Inverness is a beautiful river city, just beautiful river city. And that's the Ness River. That means mouth of the Ness, coming out to the ocean, or to the Firth. And just enjoyed being there. We were in a folk museum in the Cairngorm Mountains. And this gentleman was so much fun to talk to. Yeah. And he was talking about all the gypsies that also traversed in the Highlands, which we never would have thought of. But he was one of the docents there, and well, he was spinning some yarns. He was a lot of fun.
Meet Daisy.
St. John's Kirk in Perth is pronounced Perth. I didn't know that. I said Perth, and they said, no, it's Perth. Okay. So it was completed. This church was, Perth was called St. John's Town. And their soccer team, their football team, is still called St. John's Town. Named for the church. The town took its name from the church, not the other way around. Later it became Perth, but a sermon there in 1559 was one of the catalytic events that launched the Scottish Reformation, and John Knox preached there, having come back from the continent to get to Scotland to do that. We stayed in the Royal St. George Hotel in Perth overlooking the River Tay. It was fabulous, a beautiful, beautiful scenery looking out. The bridge was built before our Revolutionary War. It's called Royal St. George because Queen Victoria stayed there in 1848. We don't think they've changed the mattresses since then. But the location is great and the views are stunning. Anybody know where this is? Yeah. St. Andrews, Swilcan Bridge.
We were on our tour at this point, and Jeff said, I want to walk the golf course. I said, of course. And so I saw all of these other people walking, and I said, I can't believe they let you walk on the golf course. And he said, 1 day a week you're allowed, and that's Sunday. And it was Sunday. Yeah. So we were really honored to be there, to walk on the course.
And some of you I know who are great fans and play lots of golf. They were getting ready for the Open. You can see if you look in the upper left, there's the 150th. They're all set to host the 150th Open.
It was about a week and a half before
we were just there before
the British Open.
It was fabulous, great to see. And of course, we were there in St. Andrews and saw the ruins of the cathedral and the castle site.
This is where Prince William and Kate went to classes together.
Yeah.
Those are academic buildings.
St. Andrews is the third oldest in the UK after only Oxford and Cambridge. It's got a great tradition. And they pride themselves on offering a quality education at less than the Ivy Leagues in the United States. They said you can fly here first class.
All 4 years.
All 4 years, and still cost you less than it would to go to one of the premier Eastern. Anyway, this is the scene of Chariots of Fire, where they filmed the music, da 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 dum dum. I get my father-in-law up here to do the running, because I was never a runner. But it's a great scene, and that's where they filmed it. We went to worship that Sunday at Cameron Kirk, which is about 15 miles outside of St. Andrews. Small church. Graham Bobbi was the pastor. He also serves a large parish in St. Andrews. So when our group went there, a group of 30, we were 3 times the size of their congregation. But it was still, the organist was tremendous, and Reverend Bobbi was wonderful, so we enjoyed that. And, we heard pipers everywhere. Bobbi was up in the top of the Sterling Castle. I didn't make it that day. I had tested positive for COVID, and I had no symptoms whatsoever, and I tested negative the next day, so I actually got back in the saddle again. But that day, I missed the distillery.
And climbing
up
Wallace Cathedral.
Yeah. And so Bobby's pictures are the ones we have from Sterling and from Wallace. So, and so we had some fun times too, just being playful in the museums. And the River Tweed is actually often the boundary for Scotland and England through many of the years, the eastern part of that. And the River Tweed is beautiful. We drove almost the entire length of the river and stayed at a place called Merlindale, which we wanted to show you. We found the entrance to it. I had found it online because it's convenient for us in the pathway they wanted, because we drove a lot of back roads. And so here's where we stayed. As it turns out, Bobbi got up and she put on her shirt. I said, look at that cup you have. I got to take a picture of it. I don't know many people who coordinate the cup. That's really accessorizing. So this is what the manor house looked like. Yeah. And we actually had the basement backdoor entrance.
It was beautiful.
But it was a glorious setting. And then off we went to Iona. This won't take long. I was just going to say that we were you go over, first of all, to the Isle of Mull. And we're staying at Tobermory, and that's the view at Tobermory Bay.
Gorgeous.
And so up here, the ferry comes across from Oban over to here at Craignier, and then you take a bus up here where we stayed at Tobermory Bay. And then you take the same road back and then continue on down and across the island, all the way out here to Fianfort, and then you take another shorter ferry ride over to Iona. This is Iona right here. You don't get there easily.
Most of the roads are one way, too, so you have to pull off when someone's facing you.
Yeah. Getting there is part of the excitement. This was our view from the room where we stayed, and this is now, as we're getting over close to Iona, that's coming across and looking at the Abbey at Iona. Christianity landed here with St. Columba in 563. And we were quite determined. We were told there wouldn't be time to walk across To the other side of the island, this is where you land, right in this area. Over here is where St. Columba landed, in this area. And I wanted to see the Irish Sea over there. So we skipped lunch while the others were eating. My good sport of a wife said, oh, yeah, let's go. So we hot-footed it across the island to go over and see that. And this is what it looked like on the other side.
It was raining. So.
It was also raining, yeah. And we got to see St. Columba's Bay and, the landing area. And, of course, it was too rough over there to set up an abbey, so they did it on the sheltered side, and we were back over. But the walk itself was just beautiful, just so pretty. Good friends along the way, met some new friends. A thin place where only tissue paper separates the material from the spiritual. George MacLeod, 100 years ago, the founder of the Iona community that helped the restoration, describes the Isle. And those stones on the right have been there since the 700s for pilgrims that were going to Iona. Pilgrims going to Iona. It's really where Celtic Christianity, between that and Lindisfarne, which is kind of the midsection of Scotland and England, that's really got its start. And Iona is she took this picture of me. She says, you're quite the pilgrim with your phone in one hand and your coffee thermos in the other. But as pilgrims would arrive, they had these set up in various places. There are huge Celtic crosses that they would stop and pray at. And there would be stories, because many were illiterate. There'd be pictures of Scripture that would be on there, kind of telling the Bible stories. And so that would be a part of the pilgrimage, getting there. And when we get there, it was really so fulfilling for me. The church that I served previously, our associate pastor led groups there almost every year, every other year. And that was her thing, and I encouraged and endorsed that. But I'd always wanted to go, and it just never worked out for me to go. So it was great to be able to get there. Bobbi found a little quiet meditation room.
You had to climb up this narrow little set of steps and then crouch to get in there and kind of crawl, and then you couldn't have, I don't know if you would have
I'll take a picture of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a nice quiet place.
And one of our fellow travelers took a picture of me up at the altar in that worship space. That man is little to be envied, whose piety would not grow warmer amidst the ruins of Iona. Dr. Samuel Johnson. And I agree with that. I think that's so true. It's a magnificent setting. Felix Mendelssohn, the composer, was there almost 200 years ago. When in some future time I shall sit in a madly crowded assembly with music and dancing around me, and the wish arises to retire into the loneliest loneliness, I shall think of Iona. But he also appreciated what it meant. It's been the burial place of kings, medieval Scottish kings, including Macbeth, who was a real historic figure, although Shakespeare really gave him a raw deal. It was not very accurate historically. But there are somewhere around 40 kings who've been buried in that churchyard. So it's a place of great significance. We want to say thank you for allowing us to share with you tonight, but also the opportunity to have made a trip which took me from textbooks into experience. And so we're really grateful for that. Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking at the time, and I know it's 5 to 8, so any of you who need to get up and leave, please feel free to do that. But if any of you have questions, we'll answer a few questions. So those of you who need to get up and go, feel free to go do it. I understand. But if anybody has questions, we'll try to.
No questions.
Okay, time to go. Thank you. Thank you.